Welcome to Fast Politics, Ken.
Hey, good to be back with you.
I was saying before this that I feel like you're the troublemaker I dream of being. And you are getting into, you'll excuse the cliche here, some good trouble. So you have run afoul of the Cash Patel FBI. And I would love for you to start with this story because it's amazing.
Yeah, you're talking about the
I'm
nihilistic violent
talking,
extremist story?
well, I would love you to start with when they visited you. Like, I feel like there's a long character arc about
Okay.
your
Yeah,
so
it's a
start with
saga.
start with how the FBI came to recognize you.
Okay, so the JD Vance vetting documents called the dossier, I feel like that elevates it a little bit higher than it should be,
Yeah.
because really what it was the Trump campaigns just looking at different potential candidates for VP prior to when they picked then Senator Vance, and just listing out his liabilities. And so, when I had this described to me and ultimately sent to me by it was hacked by the Iranian
Source.
government, and
Oh.
I said that in the story so
Oh,
that
it was
people could know.
for the Iranian
And
government.
yep, and
Yes.
that's what precipitated the FBI visit, because I thought, well, back during Clinton, they published this stuff, and in this
Right.
case, I look at it, and there's no question that it's factual. If there was
Right.
any question that was factual, I would have approached it differently. But it's
Right.
all just open source stuff that you can go and verify. So I would feel bad just putting out like, say for instance, the Steele dossier has all these sensational claims that you can't
Right.
really vet. So it's
Right.
like I would feel bad posting something like that. But like in the case of just open source, is stuff on like his votes, on his comments on
Right.
Trump in the past, just like explicitly political stuff. So I thought, well, why shouldn't this be out there as long as you explain to people the provenance and let them
Right.
come to their own conclusion so that they're not seeing that, like the Iranians put this out there. They obviously have their set of reasons for doing so. Make of that what you will. And so that's what I did. And about 2 weeks later, I got a visit from a pencil-necked, very young FBI special agent who looked like he might have tripped on his umbilical cord on the way here because he was just such a youngster, a nice guy, and he introduced himself, counterintelligence officer, blah blah blah, and so he reads me a written statement that he kind of opens up from his pocket. And it's all very robotic and sort of stiff, and he's even sort
Right.
of admitting, he's like, yeah, this is a little weird. I don't think the FBI's necessarily should be always interacting with the media like this, but I got sent here by Washington, so I got to read you the statement. So he says, "You were the recipient of an Iranian government," and then I cut off. I said, "Yeah, I said that in the story." He goes, "You did?" I said, "Yeah." "Did you read it?" He says, "No." He said, "When did you publish it?" And I'm thinking to myself, this guy didn't even read the thing he's visiting to brief me on. So,
You just
um,
read the headline.
right.
I feel like this is a great example of someone just reading the headline.
Exactly. So he says, "How long ago did you publish it?" I said, "About 2 weeks ago." And I joked, I was like, "I thought you guys were going to come sooner," because I knew there would be a risk of something like this happening because of the politics involved. And he says 2 weeks. That's pretty fast for the federal government. And so we're laughing about it. So the whole thing had this kind of Kafkaesque quality to it, where he knew it was absurd, I knew it was absurd, he knew I knew it was absurd. So anyways, and then he leaves. Fortunately, nothing happens. And then I got a second visit when I published the manifesto of the Israel embassy shooter in Washington several weeks ago, not to glorify him. And I very explicitly
Right.
in the story say this is a terrible thing to have happened. And it wasn't a positive story. I talk about his
How d
personal. Yeah.
how'd you get that was leaked to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
So, in the story, I describe some of his personal problems and like kind of awful things he did to his friends. Like, I don't think anyone could look at that and say, this person is glorifying what happened. I'm trying to tell what happened so that we understand what led up to this moment, and hopefully you can prevent the next one. So in any case, I write that story, put it out there. The response is pretty positive. I thought it was going to be more angry. And so there wasn't much backlash until the FBI visit. Literally, I think it was the next day. And this time it was much more aggressive than the first time. It was two older special agents that start saying, "How did you get this? Why do you have this?" And it's like, I can't tell them who I got it from, but you can guess that after something like this happens, this stuff is people are, sending it around. And so it's like a pretty straightforward explanation, but they had this whole theory that, oh, did you have foreknowledge? I didn't have foreknowledge of it. I found out about
Right.
it
Why would
afterwards, like everyone
Yeah,
else.
that wouldn't make any sense. I guess that's the only button they can press on that, but people really I mean, releasing a manifesto, I mean, there's a precedent for that too, right?
Yeah, totally. To me, it's not about do you publish or not, it's how do you publish it? What kind of context do you include? are you like, it's a legitimate question to ask, like, don't glorify it, but there's all kinds of ways you can talk about something. You can talk about it from the perspective of, are there other people who have these attitudes where something like this might happen? Are there things we can do to prevent or to kind of rebut these belief systems that lead people to do something like this? And so all of that, I think, is like a more healthy response to it, rather than sticking your head in the sand and being like, we're not going to talk about this because it's bad think. And if people see it, they're just going to, like the Manchurian Candidate, just stand up and
Right.
carry out order. And it's like, people don't work that way. I have a higher respect for the public than evidently the FBI does.
So what about talk to us about this nihilism, this, yeah, talk to us about
Yeah, an
this Substack you
appropriately
just wrote. Yeah,
absurd next chapter of this story.
yeah,
So they
yeah.
have a new threat category, the FBI, that I first reported based on court documents that I found. I saw this phrase. I was like, wait, I've never seen this before. I pay very close attention to the FBI has all kinds of different designations for threat actors. This was a completely new one, nihilistic violent extremist. So I look it up and start talking to some special agent. I have some friends at FBI. I don't want to give the impression that across the board, there are good people in all sorts of agencies,
Yeah,
including that
of
one.
course.
Right, and so I asked them about it, and they basically tell me, "Oh, this is the new thing from Washington." Basically, it's gonna shift attention away from the white supremacist groups and the January 6th style stuff that they were focused on under the previous administration, and that
Right.
carries with it, it's like, "Hold on a second, you just did this and there's no public debate about, like, that wor like, first of all, what even is that?" And I'll get into that in a second. Second, is it okay to let this replace and supplant these other categories that they've been using for years and years? And is this gonna mean that there's a politicized component to how they're going after these things? And so if you look at
Yes.
the definition isn't consistent. They're like, they believe in
Right.
nothing. And so I start looking through, and there's some stomach turning cases. I don't want to minimize how awful it is, some of the groups that they're going after, what they do. But to call them nihilist just erases their politics. In some cases, they're neo Nazis. That's not nihilist. That's a belief system.
Yes, but let me just push back on that. Isn't it good that they're still going after neo-Nazis?
Oh, definitely. I'm not saying that they shouldn't
Because,
be.
like, I was worried that they had stopped doing that stuff because they were like, "These are our guys."
My concern isn't that they're going after people committing crimes. Absolutely do that,
Right.
particularly neo-Nazis. My problem is that when you designate it something, then at the end of the year, in their own internal data and what they brief to Congress and how what informs their priorities going forward, they're going to say, "Ooh, there was an increase in nihilistic violent extremists." And what they're going to see also is suddenly, "Oh, look at that. Neo-Nazi extremism went down because you've reclassified it under a different
Right.
category." That's my
Right, right,
concern.
right.
Is
Right.
it doesn't seem to me to be the appropriate category for what's going on.
Right, no question. I mean, that's for sure true. So, I would love you to sort of talk to me about what you kinda think the national security landscape looks like at this moment, because you have Kash Patel and Dan Bongino at the FBI. You have I mean, you just have many so much weirdness happening there.
It's a
I'm
good word
wondering
for it.
if you could, yeah, talk us through what you think it looks what these agencies look like right now.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic 'cause, Trump is trying to relitigate something that happened a decade ago, Russiagate, and talking about, the declassification of some of these records, which I'm not necessarily against, but it's, like, so long ago, and the biggest irony here is he's talking about how politicized, that whole thing was, which I, in part, can see why he didn't like it and what his criticisms are, but then he's responding to it with this overtly politicized administration
Yes,
doing the
was
things that I
more
was just talking
politicized.
about. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Everything he says is like, Comey and Hillary Clinton and the Democrats and Obama. It's like, are you kidding? I thought you said that you didn't like the politicization, so you're gonna respond to fire with fire? And it just doesn't make any sense. And if you look at the individual guys, I've been amazed at how much lack of vision in some ways there is, because it is politicized and they have this list of enemies, but it feels so dated. Like, who's heard it?
Yeah,
Who's thought about any of these names in 10 years?
right,
Comey
it's
and you know
true.
what I mean? It's like they're living in 2016. And then in addition to that, their ideas for the bureau. This was very interesting. Initially, Trump proposed cuts to the bureau. Kash Patel pushed back and said, "We actually need more money." I think what ended up happening at appropriations is they ended up giving them that more money. So the kind of promise of shrinking the quote unquote deep state has just completely fallen by the wayside. And
Right, right,
I don't
right.
think there's much appreciation. I mean, the paradox, I think, is most evident in the Epstein case, where they make all these lofty promises, and then you see the Justice Department review, which, if you read it carefully, has a sentence in it that says Epstein had over 1,000 victims, which suggests like that's more than I would have. That's more than we knew publicly. Before that, prosecutor said it
Yeah.
was something in the
I
dozens.
thought it was 200.
That's what they previously had said. And then in the
Yeah.
final review, based on the documents that went over, it's like, okay, so there's something bigger here. I don't know exactly what, but like it's not unreasonable for people to say, all those guys and just these two people did all of that. So, but the administration is just like pretending like nothing happened. They're just like, oh, what are you talking about? There's nothing there. It's like you just talked, you were just gassing people up about this for the last 8 years. So they're in this position where they have to deliver on demands for their base because they failed in these different ways. Like I'm talking about like the FBI budget, the Epstein investigation. And that makes me nervous because it's like, well, how are they going to do that? And then you have these deployments to Los Angeles. You have the militarized FBI where they're blurring people's faces in public press releases. So it's like, I think they're under pressure to look like they're changing something.
Doing something,
Yeah.
yeah. I wanna go into Epstein because it's just fascinating. So the polling for, like, releasing the Epstein files is, like, 80%. Like, all Americans, they don't necessarily believe in God, they don't believe in Santa Claus, they don't believe in climate change, but they do believe that they wanna see those fucking files. And I feel like what's important about this story is it's a story about the base and not a story about, like, it's one thing for people on CNN to be like, "This is beyond the pale," but this is Trump. These are the people who put Trump in there. This is the Marjorie Taylor Greens. So, do you think they're still feeling the same way? Because I know, like, Charlie Kirk and some of Trump's people have been like, "No, no," but do you think there's still that swell, number 1? And number 2, like, what could they theoretically even do?
Yeah, so you have to distinguish between the parts of the base that are like the influencers that are kind of like
Right.
pushing Trump's agenda and then just the ordinary voters. I would say the influencer class has largely been bought. If you look at like
Right.
Charlie Kirk, he goes on his show and says, I'm done talking about Epstein for now. I'm going to quote, this is a direct quote, I'm going to trust my friends in government. It's
Right.
like, wait, I thought you were conservative. What, the hell is frozen over that they got a conservative to trust the government. It was
Government,
unbelievable.
yeah.
Yeah. And then just to give you another example, there was Dinesh D'Souza, him saying, oh yeah, we got to move on and focus on other things. But it's very interesting. If you look at the base, they're not having it. Or at least
No.
when I looked at it this past couple of weeks, they were like, what are you talking about? This was one of your promises. And the Kash Patel talked about it repeatedly. And so I'm honestly sort of sympathetic to the base. Not that I have the same interpretation of what Epstein means that they do, but they're right. They were promised something and they haven't been given anything close to it. It was like a 2-page Justice Department review and 1,000 victims. There's got to be a little bit more at least, right? So that's kind of my perspective on it. And it's interesting too, because it parallels a collapse in the public support for the deportation regime. If you look at the
Right.
polling right now, it's gone like straight down. So I wonder if Epstein is actually symptomatic of a deeper dissatisfaction with the administration, but that's an acceptable way to express it because you're not going to come out and say, oh, actually immigration, I'm okay with you got to
Yeah.
sublimate it through something else. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I'm just
that's really an
speculating, but that
interesting No, that's an interesting theory, and I mean, there's something like the bottom has fallen out on Trump's support, so that makes a lot of sense that this would be a sort of palpable way to express it. I'm gonna push you for a minute just because this is like my own edification here more than anything. What do you think is in there that, like, I always just assumed, and we're just spitballing here, so this
yeah.
is not cable news, like, we're just making guesses here, so but, like, I always assumed they went into the files, saw there was nothing, maybe that Epstein had done some, like, low-level government participation with certain stuff, not like a high-level CIA guy, but just someone who CIA has people who just sort of push on other people, but aren't really, like, in it the same way, say, like, whatever is. I mean, and that they just were like, it's all, stuff that implicates some celebrities or wealthy people, and also just nothing that makes anyone look good. But, I mean, do you think there's more than that in there?
I think that there needs to be more nuance in how Epstein is a figure and how the intelligence community is characterized. Because when people say, "Oh, was he an asset?" They don't understand that there's different like levels of relationships that exist with
Right.
these agencies. Like it takes almost nothing to just fill out a confidential human source report and say, "Hey, here's what somebody said." That doesn't mean that
Right.
you're like meeting with them and paying them and directing them or anything.
Right.
They process. Just to give you another example, I was just working on a story about this. The CIA has a program called the National Resource Agency, I think it's called, and where they just process interviews of Americans coming back, travelers coming back over abroad from countries of interest to the CIA. So say you travel to, I don't know, Russia or Ukraine or North Korea for whatever reason. And then they say, oh, what did you see there? What was the, did you see any weapons here in this town or so? And this is a routine thing that they probably do thousands and thousands of people just intake. And it's like, so that's not an asset relationship. You don't fill something out. You're not being tasked with things. It's just them asking a couple things when they come back in. And it's like, that's the low level of association that I would expect to come out if just because Epstein knew everybody. And that's another part of this that I
Right.
think people are not entirely honest about, which is that this guy was an almost pathological collector of people and relationships, and he
Yeah.
just loved being around important people. That doesn't mean that he was like we probably all have this friend that's like, look at this photo I have of so and so famous
Right.
person. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, I'm sure that you kind of took a picture with him for a second and said hi. Like that doesn't mean that there's some sustained relationship there. So that to me is some of the nuance I like to see in this is like, okay, yes, he had they say Epstein associate. Like you and I are associate right now because we're, you know what
Right.
I mean? It's like, it doesn't
Right.
mean that there's some deep financial
Right.
relationship or you
Right.
so,
No.
so yeah, that's kind
So
of
he
my,
did. Yeah, that's your take too, is that he just was sort of knew everybody, is in
it was
photos
his
with
stock in
everyone.
trade. Let's be real. The guy was a
Right.
con man and he went
Right.
around telling people that he has all these connections and it's very much in his interest to do so because then he can dine out on these names and say, I know Bill Clinton, I know so-and-so. But who really knows what that means? You can't trust someone like
Right.
him. An inveterate liar.
Right. So he just a con man. Like he just was good at conning people out of money, right? And
Yeah,
also blackmailing them.
I have kind of a nuanced position on this, which is that I don't like when the major press just says, "Oh, this whole thing is a conspiracy theory," because the attitude on the part of the public to look at this and see, okay, there's a lot of influential people here, and they
Right.
seem okay with this world of whatever, all these young women. That's an appropriate reaction to this. This is kind of like a Me Too thing, I think, and it
Right.
should be
It
seen that way.
definitely is.
And
Yeah.
so, but that's different than he's cavorting with, the CIA sending him
Right.
here to target this guy. That's just a high society tolerating grossness thing, and that's bad,
Right.
and something should be done about that, and it's appropriate that people feel that something should be
Right.
done about that. But it's different,
Right.
I think, than
Right.
something something more conscious or
Yeah.
planned out, if that makes sense.
So that's what I think it is too, is that like the Weinstein stuff. It's like disgusting sexual malfeasance, rape, harassment of children, women who are between the ages of 14 and 18, which is insane. But that it's not a sort of larger, like, Syria is doing
Right.
this, to
Well, I
get
mean,
that.
Donald Trump, the president now, I don't know if anyone knew, is on record in New York Daily News, I think in the
Right.
2000s,
New
saying
York Magazine,
yeah, that's right, New York
2002.
Magazine,
He
saying
enjoys
he,
beautiful women as much as I do. Some of them
many of
are on the
them,
younger
yeah.
side. Many of them are on the younger
Isn't
side,
that
yeah.
bad enough? I mean, that's
Right.
it. That's what the thing is here. That's bad enough that these guys look the
Yeah.
other way on this stuff.
I think that the fundamental important element here is that that is bad enough. That the fact that he was going around with teenage girls is bad enough. And in fact, he was, on the sex predator. There's like a sex predator registry, a sex offender registry.
Right.
And Jeffrey Epstein was on it after 2005, and it
Yeah.
was like his house, like on the map, you could see it. And I remember actually looking up and thinking, oh, yeah, there's that rich guy who everyone knows is a sex predator, but for some reason
Interesting.
has avoided punishment this
Right.
whole time.
Right. And that's where I hesitate to have the reaction that some quarters of kind of elite opinion have where they're just like, ew, this UFO style conspiracy stuff. It's like, no, there's something there, even if it's not
What's
the extreme.
it's also like it's Weinstein, right? It's like, these people are doing something bad and you don't exactly know what it is, but I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
and you don't go to dinner at their house
This was his
because
brand. He was the
yeah,
kind of supposed to be the playboyish guy who fucks and is hanging out. Like, you can't tell
yeah,
me they didn't have some like, come on. That's basically my position is, come on. Like, this does not
yeah.
reflect well. I mean, Noam Chomsky met with this guy, I think after the conviction, and this is
Bill
somebody that a lot of the,
Gates.
yeah, and said,
Yeah,
he did his time, and it's kind of like that's something that should be an attitude shift. Like,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
guess they don't necessarily need to be like exiled to an island, but there should be some attitude of like, okay, has this person changed? at all, or
Well,
and no one seems to care
yeah.
about that in the kind of high society.
I mean, we're out of time, but I want to quote the great Jesse Cannon, who just said to me, producer Jesse, who does not get a lot of respect on this podcast because I give him a very hard time, but he was the one who said, no one is ever canceled, that cancellation is like bullshit, that these people always are able to weather it. So if you are a sex predator of children, you should be canceled. I think we should go out and that should be like a bumper sticker or
And that's
something,
what
you
this
know?
is all about. If the public hadn't had the outcry that it did, he would have gotten off with the, brief sentence he had, and he'd be back doing the same thing he was doing. And that's why people don't trust the system, because they think, well, look how you handled it last time. I honestly empathize with even the most extreme conspiracy-minded people because I get why they don't trust them anymore. They really did
Yeah.
blow this the first time around.
And many, many other things too. Ken, I hope you will come back.